Over the last few years, at rock concerts, sporting events, and other public gatherings, there have been untold numbers of attendees who must have found themselves surprised when a photographer, crouched down in front of them, stood up and just kept getting taller and taller. And the surprise must have been compounded if those folks were baseball fans and recognized the 6'10" photographer as one of the greatest pitchers in baseball history. Then again, Randy Johnson was always a guy who stood apart. During his 22-year career, the big unit went from a volatile, wild flamethrower to a precise but still intimidating and at times all but unhittable all-star who won 303 games and earned first ballot induction into the Hall of Fame with the ceremony set for later this summer. Today, he spends his days cultivating his new hobby as a photographer. But that's just the latest transformation in the story of one of the most distinctive stars in baseball history.
Not everybody's wired the same way. There was times where I would stare down a hitter, intimidate them, yeah, absolutely. I loved it. I'm not gonna deny that. I loved that one-on-one. I don't regret it. That's just the way I performed, and I performed better that way, having a little bit of an edge to me.
The other way, Randy, if you don't mind tilting, yeah, and then
there you go.
And then, Randy, for 50 years of your life, you were known as Randy Johnson. Now you're Hall of Famer, Randy Johnson. How does that affect your life?
I got an amazing phone call, and I've had a few during my baseball career, but that had to have been the pinnacle of all phone calls I've ever received from New York to inform me that I had been elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame. Not something I ever thought about when I played baseball. Nothing I ever played for. I don't think anybody really ever plays for that or anything else other than the love of the game. But when I got the phone call, I was just amazed, in awe. About 18,000 people plus that have played the game, about 200 and something in the Hall of Fame, and I'm part of that fraternity. It was the greatest moment of my career.
On the pitcher's mound, Randall David Johnson was always different. In his new passion these days, the goal hasn't changed.
It's always my hope when I'm shooting is not getting the same shots that, everybody else gets. That's your money shot. That will be my money shot. So I'm pretty good about being a 6'10" ninja, and I try to deliver with my photographs as much as I did when I was pitching.
It can't be what you'd expect. After all those years of looking so angry, now a portrait of peace and contentment.
To be quite honest with you, I don't really recognize this guy, because the guy that I dealt with every fifth day, you'd have never known that he could smile. You'd have never known that he could laugh. I don't know who that guy was. He's a delightful guy now that he's found other avenues to channel his energies, and I think he did what he had to do as a player. He did what he felt he had to do to be at his best every fifth day. But boy, it would have been a lot more fun to have the guy we know now those other 4 days between starts.
But for 22 seasons, the approach and the attitude were just as much a part of the story as anything else. Just as much a part of the domination.
19 strikeouts for Randy Johnson. He goes into his windup. Here's the pitch. He struck him out. He's got 20. What an effort tonight by the big unit.
I've been retired now for 6 years, so I'd like to think that I'm not wound as tight as I was when I was playing. And I don't regret any of that because I felt like I performed better that way, having a little bit of an edge to me.
He struck him out swinging. Fastball swing and a miss. 16 punch-outs for the big unit.
I'm not sure hiding your emotion is anything he ever said or did. He was very raw.
Bends him backwards.
It wasn't nice, and it was palpable.
Swinging strikeout.
And I think that made hitters uncomfortable. I think he was okay with that. Ooh! He drilled you or he knocked you on your butt?
He would plant one right in your rib cage or toss one up around your helmet just to let you know, hey, I'm out here, sumbitch, and I'm gonna be out here all night. That was intimidating.
Look out there.
6'10", had the long mullet going, facial hair. He thrived on that intimidation that he had.
Johnson has had pitches clocked at as much as 102 miles per hour.
He threw so hard. I mean, he threw so hard.
Pitch on the way. Swing! It's over! He has done it! Randy Johnson with the first Mariner no-hitter in history.
There's a potential of him no-hitting you every time he took the mound.
2-2 slider, swung on and missed. And Randy Johnson has painted an absolute masterpiece.
It's rare that you can physically be that good with that kind of rage going, but man, it was impressive.
5-time Cy Young Award winner, a pair of no-hitters, a perfect game, and now 4,000 strikeouts.
The numbers that he put up, he was one of the greatest that ever lived.
Randy Johnson wins number 300.
The moment that I'm on stage and I am inducted into the Hall of Fame, what I want to do is make this about the people that kept me at the major league level and letting them know I wouldn't have been there had it not been for you.
For Johnson, the long path to Cooperstown began some 3,000 miles across the country as the son of a police officer in Livermore, California.
When I was growing up in the Bay Area, the moments for me were playing Little League Baseball. You know, I played Babe Ruth, then played in high school. I also played Pop Warner football, also played tennis, also played basketball. So I played a lot of sports, but baseball was one sport that I really enjoyed. I gravitated towards it. You know, I enjoyed pitching.
He was almost 6 feet as a 12-year-old and 6'7" as a sophomore in high school. His size gave his fastball velocity, but made control all but impossible.
Here's me, 175 pounds, could throw hard, but I can't even throw a strike.
But USC saw his potential and offered him a scholarship. He entered college in 1982.
And when I think about the times of seeing him at campus at USC, I always just remember this big guy riding his bicycle. But, you know, the thing is, he loved photography.
That's where I picked up a camera and learned about photojournalism, and now I'm able to fall back on that passion of photography that I've been doing for over 30 years on an education that I got because of baseball.
Johnson's college career was far from dominant, but again, the potential was tantalizing, and the Montreal Expos drafted him in the second round in 1985. Next would come 4 years in the minor leagues spent trying to harness his talent.
I was 6'10" coming out of college, trying to figure out how to throw strikes on a consistent basis, and there not being that many pitchers to really get feedback or insight from. All you know is that you need to pitch with the same mechanics as someone 6'3" to 6'5", but you're 6'10", so you got longer arms, longer legs, and you have to be consistent at doing it in order to throw strikes.
Word of mouth kind of spread around the minor leagues and throughout the Expos organization. They've got this kid that's, 10 feet tall and throws 100 miles an hour, has no idea where it's going.
Johnson was first called up to the big leagues in September of 1988. And soon after, his new all-star teammate Tim Raines gave him a nickname too good for anyone to forget: the Big Unit.
You know, being, 5'8", 5'9", I don't want to sell him short, 5'10", and me being, almost a foot taller than him, a nickname like that would stick.
He began the next season in the Expos rotation, but every start seemed like a struggle.
Goodbye. Boy, he really tattooed that one. Randy Johnson has yet to win this season.
For me, being 6'10", throwing a pitch 95 to 100 miles an hour in the size of a shoebox for a strike, it was really hard for me to do that consistently. Now, there was moments.
He struck him out.
And I think that's what encouraged me, and I hung in there, and I never knew how good I could be, but I wanted to get there.
The Expos, though, didn't want to wait. And in late May of '89, they traded Johnson as part of a package to Seattle for all-star Mark Langston.
When they made that trade, I was like, you gotta be kidding me. And then came in this goofy dude looking like Big Bird. Like, what in the world are we doing with this guy? And he couldn't throw a strike anywhere.
Look out there.
First time I met Randy, we all just like, he's really tall. I mean, did we know, you know, at 24 that he was gonna be the guy he is now, that special? No, we had no idea.
The 10 years that I spent in Seattle were the greatest moments of my career, professionally and personally.
When Randy Johnson arrived in Seattle, the city was on the brink of becoming the epicenter of the music world. The Mariners, meanwhile, had never had a winning season in their 12-year existence. Now, Johnson was joining a young nucleus trying to change that.
Left-hander Randy Johnson takes the mound now for the Seattle Mariners. Johnson, perhaps the hardest throwing starting pitcher in baseball.
And on a Saturday night in June of 1990 came an unforgettable sign of what lay ahead.
He showed you shades of being able to have greatness.
24,000 incredibly rabid Mariner fans are looking for that final strike. The 0-2 pitch on the way. Swing! It's over! He has done it! High fastball, Randy Johnson being mobbed by Scott Bradley down to greet him and the entire Mariner team.
By the time he got to 90 and to that no-hitter, players knew the stuff was electric. And if you caught him on a night when it was all clicking, you get a no-hitter.
Randy Johnson with the first Mariner no-hitter in history.
There was a young pitcher that threw the ball around 100 miles an hour, but that really had limited success only because of the fact he had a little trouble finding the strike zone from time to time.
Here's a payoff. Devereaux takes way high and outside. The ball got by the catcher and hit the backstop on a fly. Wow.
Nowadays they call it effectively wild. You know, back then they called it wild.
The most difficult thing hitting off of Randy Johnson is he doesn't know where it's going half the time. So, you know, if you're a hitter, you don't know where it's going either.
I didn't mean to do that, sorry. I just can't throw strikes.
Look out there.
And his catchers took care to protect themselves as well.
I took all the precautions I possibly could and had as much protective gear on my body when I caught Randy. Including, and let me say, including making a special padding inside my glove. I had a big L shape that would protect my index finger and all my fingers across here.
How hard he threw was never the problem. And Johnson knew the book on himself better than anyone.
When he's good, but when he's bad, we just need to, you know, limit those bad moments. But it was frustrating.
We've gotten rid of some of the wildness he exhibited in the first.
The Orioles had
well, I take that back.
You have to be able to throw strikes. And that was really the scouting report. I mean, you can't throw strikes.
And it is 5-1. That is the 10th walk allowed by Johnson.
It all went back to his height, his biggest asset and his greatest curse.
Someone as tall as Randy usually bounces and shoots the ball for a living instead of playing catch with it.
6'10". Those are a lot of moving parts to harness.
Watch how Johnson finishes there, and then just continues the body.
I was looking for that one thing that would be defining in allowing me to be consistent with my arm angle and repeat my motion, and really up to that point hadn't found it.
Help finally came in a meeting with a pitcher 8 inches shorter, but with just as much power in his arm.
You're taking all your force and driving it to the plate.
Nolan was and Tom House were together doing a teaching video on power pitching, and they asked Randy to be a part of it, and Randy was humbled by it. And the day of the video shoot, you could see Nolan and Tom House talking. Then they went over and spent about literally 10-15 minutes with Randy.
And we had conversation and talked about mound presence, and that was his game, and taking charge of that.
We kind of talked about mechanics a little bit. It was really just some small little things that I had to work on myself.
With your head, your shoulder, everything is dry, and you're...
There's certain people who when they speak, you listen. And it changed his life.
The thing I remember about him was that after I talked to him, it was a month later, he struck out 18 of us.
And this is the biggest strikeout game in the major leagues this year. It ties the Mariners club record.
And I thought, why didn't I visit with him after my career?
That's Randy Johnson, winner of last night's game. Pretty nice message for his dad, huh?
I was in Seattle, my mom or my dad. They were in California. We were going to meet in California on Christmas Day. We get a phone call about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon that, my mom was in hospital in Sacramento with my dad in ICU, and we should probably get there. And then, you hit rock bottom when you walk into ICU and you find out that your dad died.
The sudden death of Bud Johnson in late 1992 would have a profound effect on his 29-year-old son.
Losing my dad on Christmas Day in 1992, had the most impact of my career. It took me a while to really recover from that.
Having seen his dad come in the locker room and me being a foot and a half away from him day in and day out, it's tough. And that's the guy that he looked up to.
He's the one that instilled in me not to be complacent with your success. That was really kind of what defined my career, is never being content with anything, always trying to do better and be better, and he just really instilled that in me. After I was able to kind of get my feet back under me again, there was nothing that was going to hold me back.
Got him.
Strike 3 call. Since that day, he devoted himself and he channeled a little bit of anger into being on the field.
And 11 in the game for Johnson.
Every time he'd win a ball game, he'd point up to the sky to acknowledge the fact that, Dad, I know you're up there watching.
The pitch. He got it. He finishes off with a flourish, and he points skyward and says, "That's for you, Dad."
I always thought about, my dad.
It's a hard way, it's a hard transformation to go through, but it helped him. It really did. It helped him mature. It helped him stabilize. It made him strive a little harder.
Got it.
I didn't understand that until 93. And then I started pushing a little bit harder. And that came with the chip on my shoulder that nothing's gonna faze me.
That's to Carter. Got him with a fastball outside.
That chip was embedded in me. It was embedded in me until the day that I retired.
Uh-oh.
That's just the way I performed, and I performed better that way.
It was in the middle of that 93 season that Johnson's transformation took center stage. In one at-bat, he went from wild to dominant.
John Kruk fanning himself off. Watch the reaction of John Kruk. Would you say his heart is palpitating a bit?
Wasn't on purpose. It was Baltimore, really humid there, and the ball slipped out of my hand.
Look at the next step. I don't blame John one bit.
The results were kind of funny. You don't see that much.
You knew that was coming. John had no chance.
When I stepped in the box, I said, all I want to do is make contact. And after the first pitch, I said, all I want to do is live. And I lived. So I had a good at-bat.
Randy Johnson had officially arrived. And in 1993, he seemed to climb the ladder to stardom one batter at a time.
Randy, early in his career, had control problems, and once he got that worked out and got consistent with his delivery, he dominated.
Slider, swung on and missed. That was devastating.
By 1995, he was all but unhittable, with an 18-2 record, the league's top ERA, and the most strikeouts in baseball for a third straight season.
From my first year there in 93 till 95 when he won his first Cy Young, you could see that nice improvement.
Fastball's good enough. 16 punch-outs for the big unit.
I became a different pitcher.
The big unit was now the most menacing pitching force in the game.
When you look at Randy, you see the guy that's on the mound and he's sweating and he's got the long hair and he's intimidating.
The biggest, most imposing pitcher in the game today, Randy Johnson.
When he leaves his house, he's got his game face on.
He is pumped. He wants it.
Oh, yeah, he's ready to go.
He's breathing fire right now.
No nonsense out there. You didn't see him smile. I mean, this guy was all business. He was focused. You just look at his eyes.
I think it was the aura that was around him. You felt an intensity and almost an anger when he went out there on the mound.
Got it. A huge part of your career was about intimidation. How important of a, as part of your arsenal was that?
Well, I can't lie. But you have to be able to get hitters out. You have to be able to throw strikes. The reason why it was easier was because I was tall. I was bigger than most people. Because I threw harder than most people.
99 miles an hour. Strike three called. He gets Tony Gwynn looking.
And what was probably more intimidating to a hitter was now he was just throwing one under your chin to get you off the plate.
Almost hit him.
There was times where I would stare down a hitter. Absolutely. I loved it. I'm not going to deny that. I loved that one-on-one.
Oh, down he goes.
I never tried to hurt anybody in the game. Intimidate them, yeah.
Between 1993 and 97, he won 75 games for the Mariners. None more memorable than an early October start in 95.
I was going to be pitching a one-game playoff that would determine the winner of the AL West. It was in the King Dome, and it was exciting for the city, the fans. At that point, it was probably the biggest game I had pitched in my career.
Pitching the biggest game of his life, and it's one of his best. The Seattle Mariners are the champions of the American League West.
Next came the Yankees in the American League Division Series. And Seattle fell behind 2-0 in the best of 5 before Johnson took the mound in Game 3.
Working on a three-hitter here tonight. Oh, baby. The big unit does it again. 10 Ks on the night.
I pitched Game 3, and we win that game, and we win Game 4.
Now we get to Game 5, and Randy comes into my office and he says, if you need me, I'm going to be available.
As we got a little bit deeper in the game, about 6th, 7th inning, goes, go put your spikes on. Put my spikes on, went down in the bullpen, and the crowd went crazy.
You don't really realize how loud it is until your manager walks out and points down there, and then here he comes.
Here comes the big fella.
And you're like, oh, we got a chance now. This is gonna be good.
Got him. Struck out the side in the top of the 10th.
I came in, and despite only having a day's rest, I didn't pitch great, or actually gave up a run. Things could have backfired from that effort that I gave, but we ended up scoring a couple of runs.
Here comes Junior to third base. They're going to wave him in. The throw to the plate will be late. The Mariners are going to play for the American League Championship. I don't believe it.
That was the biggest moment for that franchise up to that point. We accomplished something for the fans there that stuck by us and came out in groves. And it's one reason why that franchise is still there, based on what that team did.
The Miracle Mariners have won it.
Seattle was the foundation of my career, playing 10 years there. That was my apprenticeship.
In Seattle, Randy Johnson seemed to get better and better. But in 1998, the franchise was facing some tough financial decisions about their young core.
The Mariners struggled with were they going to be able to keep A-Rod and keep Ken Griffey Jr., and they didn't have the resources to extend all of them, and were not capable of coming forward and giving them an offer and it extended all the way to the trade deadline.
On July 31st, Johnson was traded during the Mariners game. After 10 years in Seattle, the big unit was headed to Houston.
It was the fact that Seattle didn't think that they could re-sign him. Well, we got 3 pretty good young kids for him, but boy, I tell you what, I would have much preferred to have him over there with me for my last 3 years there.
We got on a plane that night, flew to Houston. The contract controversy, the feeling that the Mariners were not going to take care of him, I think really put him in a funk. But I think the trade all of a sudden drew a line in the sand, and it was just unbelievable to watch.
He got him, 8 strikeouts.
That is almost unfair.
Houston, it was only 2 months, but it was the best 2 months of my career.
Randy Johnson only made 11 regular season starts for the Astros, but won 10 of them, including 4 shutouts and a microscopic 1.28 ERA overall.
He has turned it up and turned it up more than one notch.
To go 10-1, it snowballed into an incredible experience regarding free agency at the time, because his performance at Houston was impeccable.
A Cy Young Award winner in his prime doesn't hit the open market too often. A host of teams went after Johnson, but to the surprise of some, the expansion Arizona Diamondbacks became the favorites.
Well, first of all, he lived in Arizona, so we were always intrigued by the possibility. But most players want to go with a team that has a chance to win. So there was also this concern that with an expansion team, would they really be able to contend?
Diamondbacks finished their first season with 97 losses.
A lot of people are wondering why the Diamondbacks. This team is not the same team that lost last year. This team is already much better. I believe this team's going to win.
Well, he really brought legitimacy to the team. You realize you're going to win with pitching and with defense, and they needed to make the biggest statement they possibly could. And in convincing Randy to sign here, it was just the perfect storm. He put the Diamondbacks on the map.
Randy Johnson to take the mound for the first time as a Diamondback. Struck him out with a fastball on the inside corner.
Randy was a guy that pitched on emotion, and usually it was anger.
Struck him out. 13 strikeouts for Johnson.
He was angry at the other team. He was angry at anybody that stepped in the box.
1-2, and that's strike 3 called, and he's peering in as he walks off the mound.
I just kind of would get caught up in the moment. I was very animated out there.
He's a competitor, he's filthy, and he's nasty.
He was trying to embarrass every single hitter he ever faced.
2-2 to Castro. Randy Johnson has tied the Major League record for strikeouts in a 9-inning game.
You buy a ticket to watch a pitch against the Reds, he goes 9 innings, punches out 20, and I was like, okay, that was badass.
Johnson's excellence was fueled by an inner fire that burned more than just his opponents.
Even those of us who were on the same side as Randy rarely got to see a smile. On days he pitched, he was as focused as any human being I've ever seen with what he had to do that day against the opponent. Fortunately or unfortunately, that carried over to his own clubhouse.
It was about the 3rd, 4th, or 5th inning. It was nothing. And he comes in and he starts dropping F-bombs. You know, let's effing go, swing the bats, this and that and this and that. And I looked over at one of the infielders and he kind of went, like rolling his eyes like, okay. What he meant and what he said, I think, kind of diverged. Because the next day, I looked at him and I said, dude, you gotta, you know, what was that? And he's like, well, you know, Nolan Ryan used to told me one time to, you know, you want to fire your teammates up. You want to try and motivate them. I said, no, I get that. The Lombardi, New Rocky thing. I totally understand that, but that's not what you did. He's like, what? I said, dude, you were like MFing your teammates. He's like, no. I was like, okay, yeah, you were.
But there was no arguing about the results that Johnson produced in the desert. He won the National League Cy Young Award his first 4 seasons with the Diamondbacks. And after Curt Schilling arrived in 2000, the devastating 1-2 punch led Arizona to make history the next year.
And the Arizona Diamondbacks become the fastest expansion franchise to reach the World Series.
The Diamondbacks' matchup with the Yankees in the Fall Classic came just a month after the 9/11 terrorist attacks. Arizona won Game 1 at home. When Johnson took the mound for Game 2, he was his usual dominant self.
Randy Johnson twirls a complete game shutout to give the Arizona Diamondbacks a 2-0 lead in this World Series.
You know, after going up 2-0, we lose 3 in a row in New York, and then we're coming down 3-2. We felt pretty good with Randy on the mound for Game 6.
A sellout crowd at Bank One Ballpark. The Arizona Diamondbacks trying to stave off elimination.
He went out. We scored some runs early for him, and I think, you know, that night we only needed 1 or 2 for him because he was on his game once again.
With the game well out of reach by the 7th, manager Bob Brenly started thinking ahead to Game 7.
Could you throw an inning tomorrow if we stop you now? You could?
Well, yes, definitely.
Okay, then we'll hit for you right here. We'll get with you now.
I think he relished the idea that he was the guy. He was the man that we needed to win that World Series. Randy, in his own mind, recognized that if we were going to have success, he had to be the big unit.
I mean, if it dictates that you need me to pitch, I mean, I'll be ready. Trust me.
Going into Game 7 with Schilling on the mound, we felt good, and then with Randy in relief, we felt even better if we had to go that route.
Curt Schilling threw well, but after the Yankees got a run in the 8th to take a 2-1 lead, Brenly called upon his best option to make sure that there'd be no more damage.
And the big unit's coming in the ballgame. And listen to the crowd now.
This place got loud when the big fella came in from the bullpen. That was, I'm still getting goosebumps thinking about it right now.
When the man threw over 100 pitches yesterday, and he's coming in the next day.
I think anytime somebody goes above and beyond what's expected and then has success doing it, that's what cements you in the lore of baseball.
For the 0-2 to Posada. Swing and a miss, struck him out. Johnson retires all 4 hitters he faces, and that sets the stage for the bottom of the 9th inning. And a little blooper, base hit! Diamondbacks win! They're the world champion!
And that's what you play for. So I'm very thankful that I had that opportunity to share the greatest moment of my career with my teammates there in the city that I still live in and the organization that I'll be representing when I go to the Hall of Fame. You know, I played 22 years and I could be anywhere and they want to talk about the bird.
It's like, oh my God, what just happened?
Well, at first I thought somebody threw something on the field. Then I realized, wait a minute, the confetti doesn't go that far.
It was the year that we won the World Series, 2001, so maybe it was an omen of things to come. I got a letter from PETA saying if I ever did that again, they would, you know, I'm just kidding.
You know, it's interesting. He doesn't want to be complimented on his personal accomplishments. He's not looking for that, but it does bother him that certain things he's remembered by. I mean, Randy Johnson, and the first thing you think about is the bird. It's like, I mean, come on.
It was not something I planned. It happened in a fraction of a second.
Hitting a bird with a pitch, the odds are almost immeasurable. But over his career, Randy Johnson certainly grew familiar with the extraordinary.
Early on in this game, I was specifically watching Robbie Hammock, his catcher that night. And wherever Robbie set up and put the glove, Randy didn't miss it by more than an inch.
A swing and a miss. There's that slider. It is just tying up these hitters.
Every pitch he threw is exactly where he wanted to throw it.
1, 2, 3 in order go the Braves.
12 up and 12 down. He was throwing 96 to 99 miles an hour.
Wow.
It looked like he was actually placing it in the catcher's glove. You had no time to react. He feels like he's standing on top of you.
Fastball inside corner, got him looking. Strikeout number 12. And with every pitch now, the crowd beginning to ooh and ah as they become more and more aware of just how close this is getting.
A perfect game with 1 out to go.
Swung on and missed. And Randy Johnson, at age 40, has painted an absolute masterpiece.
still feel like that could have been one of my best years at age 40. Unfortunately, it was a year where the Diamondbacks, struggled mightily.
It would be exciting not only for the ball players, but for us as well to see a W.
The Diamondbacks were downsizing their payroll at the time. They said, where do you want to go if we were to trade you? I chose New York. I wanted to go to New York.
Hey, buddy. Hey, how you doing?
Hey.
What? No cameras, man. No cameras. What is that? No cameras.
Get out of my face, that's all I ask.
Just taking a picture.
No, you're not. Don't get in my face. I don't care who you are. Don't get in my face.
Welcome to New York.
Headlines, big unit, big jerk. You might think he knocked him on the ground and kicked him. His persona basically was not a good fit for New York media.
A lot of things are new to me here, playing with the Yankees now. I mean, getting out of the car yesterday, arriving to my hotel, not used to having photographers pop out from behind the bushes and taking my picture.
Randy handled that so well. We got him on Letterman 2 nights later, and they laughed about it and joked about it.
Honest to God, a guy comes up and sticks a camera in your face. You can't do that. This guy was a goon and a thug.
You're right.
He should be apologizing to you.
I think he regrets that incident in New York.
There's no doubt I was wrong, regretful.
No. I think he regretted it from the moment it happened, but it was a reaction. We're all humans. I think he's come a long way to understand the role that all these people play in your life, when you're a performer or an athlete. Everybody has a role to play, and you have to be respectful of what their job is. I think he knows that.
Got off on the wrong foot. Admittedly so, but I like New York.
Randy, is there anything about New York that surprised you so far?
I still felt like I had something to offer, at 41. I could still get hitters out. And was just as much of a competitor there as I was 5, 10 years before coming there.
His stuff was not quite totally dominating, but he had good seasons. Obviously, you get a guy later in his career, and he wasn't quite the same as the guy that was just kind of unhittable.
I'm not so sure the fastball has got as much zip on it as he would like it.
I still won 17 games, but now the next year, you thought All-Star break, was when I started having issues with my back.
This is a struggle for Randy today.
I gave everything I had.
I mean, it may be a little sore. I mean, he's a warrior. He's going to pitch even if he's not 100%.
I pitched the last half of the season with a herniated disc. I had an epidural so I could pitch in the postseason.
I'm impressed with Randy because, coming in with the back problem, whatever, you just didn't know what you're going to get from him. But he has given the Yankees an opportunity to win.
In 2007, Johnson was dealt back to Arizona, where he'd pitched 2 more years. Randy spent his final season in San Francisco.
I wasn't the same pitcher that I once was. I was throwing 95 to 100. So I was fine with that. I also realized that I had played far longer than I had ever set out to play and never, ever expected or fathomed doing some of the things that I did.
Career strikeout, number 4,673, second all-time.
You look at the career arc and you look at how good he was late into his career. I mean, the stuff that he did.
Randy Johnson wins number 300.
That's why the numbers that he put up ended up where they were, and are numbers that only 1 or 2 or 3 people in the history of the world can say they've ever achieved.
It's been an amazing career for Randy Johnson.
The last question we are wrapped is
Good.
Standing on that.
My God, it went from a 45-minute interview to a 60 minutes with Barbara Walters. Oh, these are the outtakes now, see?
Well, thank you all very much for being here today. It's a very exciting day in the history of the Arizona Diamondbacks franchise to have with us one of the newest Hall of Famers, Randy Johnson, who was elected to the National Baseball Hall of Fame today.
I was?
Well, breaking news.
I got an amazing phone call. Congratulations, you've been inducted into the 2015 Hall of Fame, and I got goosebumps, and I felt like I've never felt before in my life.
Well, played for the Expos, the Mariners, the Astros, the D-backs, the Yankees, and finished his career here in San Francisco.
It was something 5 years ago people were talking to me about, and I put it off. I never joined a fraternity in college, and now I'm amongst one of the coolest in the world.
You know, it's the ultimate pat in the back for him. You know, he had a great career, and now he's part of this elite club of amazing athletes, and I think he's totally pleased about that.
Today, Randy Johnson has clearly shed the intensity that defined him as a player. But that doesn't mean anyone's forgotten just how fierce he was on the pitcher's mound.
He had a philosophy that he had to work harder every day than he did the day before. Very serious about everything. Ironically, he's changed dramatically since that he's retired.
We had an instance earlier this year in San Francisco. My partner Steve Berthume and I were sitting in the booth, and Randy just pops in the middle of an inning.
Madison Bumgarner, World Series MVP pitchers. Another one just wandered into our booth.
Yeah. Laughing and joking and telling stories, and when he got up to leave the booth, I turned to Bert and I said, I don't know who that guy was.
Nowadays, you're more likely to find that guy somewhere with a camera in his hand. Chasing perfect games are firmly in the past. Now it's about looking for the perfect shot.
As some of you may know, I've kind of fallen back on a passion that I studied back in college, which is photography.
When you get done, some people feel really liberated, and I think that's what he's doing with his photography, with his travel.
I've been to Africa twice, Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand. The list goes on, and I enjoy that. And I enjoy my photography. I'm not great at it, but I enjoy it. It's therapeutic for me, much like going out and pitching.
Dove right into photography. I think he's following Rush around. He's good friends with Geddy Lee from Rush.
He started by just shooting things that he liked, like rock and roll shows. But now he's going to these exotic places. He's taking street photography. He's getting more into the human side of what makes a great photographer.
Photography just hones me in on what I'm trying to see. You know, having tunnel vision when I was pitching, looking at the catcher's glove, looking at subject matter when I pitch through the lens.
I think a lot of his former players laugh about it because he wasn't real media friendly, didn't like a lot of the media attention with the cameras and things around, and then all of a sudden here we find him, you know, in a camera well, doing concerts and sporting events and things like that.
To those who knew Randy Johnson best as a pitcher, the transformation seems almost as striking as anything he did on the field.
You seem to be really enjoying yourself these days.
Well, I think it took me a while.
I talked to him at the induction of the Seattle Mariner Hall of Fame, and I think he has a piece about him now that he did not have when he was playing.
And I thought it was rather poignant. One of the quotes attributed to Johnson, he said, "Now I realize how precious time is. Every time I call one of my family members, I tell them I love them. Life is very short, and you have to enjoy it while you can."
Seeing the guy I saw just small glimpses of when I played, there was a really happy guy dying to creep out. I think life is just kind of now, it's exhaling and soaking it all in.
It's good to have you, big unit.
It's nice to be back.
58-mile-an-hour fastball.
Well, I threw a strike. That's all
there
that matters.
You go.
I wanted to call him and congratulate him, which I did. But I didn't think that he'd be as talkative as he was. You could see that he had found peace.
On Sunday, July 26th, Randy Johnson will make his last stop as a pitcher in Cooperstown, New York.
I can only anticipate that I'll be nervous. Who wouldn't be? Who wouldn't be in awe of being on stage with living legends that have played the game well before I played it?
He's just one of the greatest pitchers of our era. And I think he's actually grown beyond that. He's sort of a folk hero in America. He's that larger-than-life guy. He's the modern-day Paul Bunyan in a way.